The human race has been on this planet for anywhere between 100,000 to 250,000 years. It's actually not a lot of time, but let's say 100,000. For the vast majority of that, we accomplished very little. We discovered fire, which is kind of cool. We invented glue, learned how to use rope, made the wheel, did pretty good with language. Well, maybe I'm not being charitable enough. Maybe we got a good deal of stuff done, I suppose. But we spent a lot of that time being quite afraid of the dark, being superstitious, claiming that it's obvious that the sun is moving around us and we're not moving at all, and following what our gut tells us and following what's obvious, and worshiping all sorts of gods we invent. I mean, at a minimum, 3,000 unique gods we've invented to explain things because we're afraid of the dark and we don't know where the sun goes at night. 400, 350 years ago, we start to develop something called the scientific method. Now, honestly, in some ways, it's not all that special. All it is a way of breaking down information so that we can process it in a way that closer reflects reality and not the biases of our brain. We think of our brains as perfect, actually. We think our brain just gives us the information we want. No, our brain makes up loads of shit. It just makes it up, and we know this. There's all sorts of, some great games you can play with cognitive bias and all sorts of other genuine faults in our way of perceiving things. When I was teaching, one of the things I would use would be holograms, which I always had to print out on paper. Not holograms, but necessarily those illusions. It's you look at it and it looks like it's moving. You could swear it's moving. It's not moving. You can't do it on the computer because even if it's a JPEG, everyone thinks it's a GIF, and it's a trick. It's animated. It's not a trick. Your brain's incapable of seeing it accurately, incapable. You have a blind spot in your eye where you're not receiving any information. This is where the retina attaches to the back of the eye. You cannot receive information there. And your brain extrapolates and tries to figure out what's there. But knowing that, you can trick it. And you can put information that belongs there, and the brain reconstructs it inaccurately, and you get all sorts of illusions. And really cool stuff. So we put some of it out on In Time. People can play with it. But we don't process information well at all. Confirmation bias, fundamental attribution error, affirming the consequent, all fallacies that cause us to think things must be true that aren't even remotely close to true. We are phenomenally poor at rational thought. We just are, as a species, across the board. The scientific method is the best way we have to get around that. Period. End of discussion. Because we have these biases, we continue to deny it, despite its obvious and irrefutable efficacy, because it scares us, because it takes the magic out of the world. I get that. But we have accomplished more in the last 350 years using the scientific method than in the 100,000 or 99,000 years before that. It works. Period. We got a man off of, we're on a spinning planet. We got a man off of this spinning planet. He was in Texas, went to, I think, Alabama to leave, but he born and raised in Texas, goes to Alabama, leaves this planet, travels to a moon in orbit of us. The moon isn't spinning, actually, it's tide locked, but it's certainly in orbit. Lands on the moon, gets out, does a little jig, gets back in his little spaceship, and comes back here alive in one piece, while this whole shebang is in orbit of a sun that is in a spiraling galaxy that is hurtling through the universe. We did that, and it wasn't with intuition. It wasn't with our gut. Our gut had absolutely nothing to do with it. In fact, we had to suppress it. That's how we did it. Are scientists wrong? Sure, they're wrong all the time, but the way the scientific method works also, people have a tendency to think they're wrong when really they weren't wrong, because people don't understand what they're saying. They're very precise. They use language in a very specific way. The layman often doesn't understand what they're saying. The news media often doesn't understand what they're saying. They find evidence that red wine can help the heart in certain ways. The news media reports scientists confirm that red wine is good for the heart. That's not what they said, and when they later find out that wine is bad for the heart, people say, oh, scientists have reversed themselves. No. The news media did not report it accurately. They didn't care. They didn't speak the language. They speak a different language than the scientists. They use language differently. Global warming. Scientists came out and said there are processes that are cooling the Earth. But they also said that there were processes that were warming the Earth. And the question was, which process was going to be the one that wins? Nobody knows. That was, I think, in the 70s. Michael Crichton, who's a science fiction writer, and Jurassic Park, I think Andromeda Strain, if I remember correctly, actually did not believe in global warming, and he said the reason is because he was around when scientists said that the Earth was cooling. That's not what they said. At any rate, Donald Trump has gone around saying that his gut tells him that this malaria medication is going to work. One, there are people who need that malaria medication. It's saving lives. If you allocate all of it to patients of COVID-19, then people who need it aren't going to have it and they're going to die. So you are killing people by doing that. Period. End of discussion. That's not up for any debate anywhere, in any circle. The other problem is there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever. There is a fake paper. Well, there's a white paper. We covered it on In Time here before Trump even got a hold of this insane notion. We covered it. We went through the whole thing. It's bogus. We had a doctor of chemistry go over it, review it. It's a joke. It was written by a scientist who did no lab work and was working for a cryptocurrency company. I have no idea what, and it was a chemist, biochemist, working for a cryptocurrency company. The second person on that paper was a lawyer. All of the pieces of that paper were actually showing its efficacy, this drug's efficacy on malaria. There was no evidence of its efficacy on COVID-19. Nonetheless, the authors of this paper said that they were sure because there was an 80% commonality between malaria and COVID-19, they were confident that this would work, and they were taking anecdotal evidence, which you cannot use in science for very good reasons. They were taking this evidence to say this malaria would work, and they even said it has been demonstrated to show high efficacy. Lies. Absolute and utter lies. All the scientists in his team that looked at it said this is a horse shit. His gut knows better. Turns out the medication is also very toxic. It does kill a number of the people who take it. You have to take it exactly as prescribed, or it is lethal. It's a little bit like lithium in that way, in that the effective dose is a hair under the toxic/lethal dose. Get it wrong, because your weight is slightly different, your metabolism is slightly different, and it can kill you. It's been killing people. So he's been killing people by denying this medicine to people who need it, and by giving it to people to whom it is toxic. And the net result, and looking at it so far from his wonderful little experiment, which he said, hey, there's no harm in trying, is that it hasn't cured one person. It hasn't helped a single person overcome COVID-19. The good news is he has found another solution. Sunlight, according to Donald Trump now, is the next cure to COVID-19. He believes sunlight will help people. Interesting. He's in the process of trying to open up the country. He's trying to get it back on track because of how important the economy is. And he's discovered sunlight can help everyone. Wow, if I go outside, I can get more sunlight. I'm sure that's a coincidence. Denver, Colorado, decimated by this virus that's just going, it's wiping everybody out. Nobody knows what to do. They shut down. They shut down exactly as they should. Mayor William Fitz Randolph Mills shuts it down, says he's going to make sure that the virus is eradicated. Now everybody's sitting there saying, you know, the virus isn't that bad. It's just You know what? They just put a fancy name on it. It's the same as everything we've seen before. It's no different. It's the same virus. We should open up businesses. It's hurting the economy, and they start to push him to open this up. Under the mistaken impression that we live in a democracy, he starts to think that maybe their opinion matters. It doesn't. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic. We do not make the decisions. We elect people to make those decisions for us. There's a reason that's extraordinarily important. It's important because we are not doctors. We are not politicians. We are not capable of catching up on all of the nuance between our relationship with the EU, NATO, Russia, the history of all of these countries, how it affects everybody. We cannot do that. We have jobs, we have lives, we have families. It is the job, the sole job of our elected officials to become educated on those subjects and to make the best choice they possibly can. I'm not talking about paternalism. I'm not saying that they own us and we have to do everything we want to and they are beholden to us. When they screw up, we oust them and elect somebody else. But that's their job. And Mayor Mills, caving to pressure primarily from businesses, but also people who are just going stir crazy, reopens Denver, Colorado. The year is 1918, and the virus is called the Spanish influenza. Every scientist there said, you reopen, we're going to get a second wave, and it's going to be worse than the first. He did it anyway. The second wave decimated Denver. Denver, Colorado lost more people in the second wave resulting from his opening too early than the entire state of Colorado lost in World War I. And they had to go through the entire process again. This is not guesswork. It only looks like guesswork because we are trying to predict the future. I saw Dr. Drew Pinsky, who I actually kind of like, from his days all the way back to Dateline or Loveline on MTV. Dr. Drew Pinsky comes out and says, this is just a virus like any other. Dr. Phil comes out and says, more people drown in their swimming pools that are killed by this. If we see an asteroid heading straight for the planet, a killer asteroid that is going to wipe out all living things in exactly 1 year, we could sit there and say, well, how many people died from asteroids last week? I mean, really, it's not that big a deal. That's phenomenally fucking stupid. That's just stupid. Let's call a duck a duck. That's stupid. We understand physics. We understand the motion of bodies in space, and we can, in fact, accurately predict if we're going to get wiped out by an asteroid next year. Space is we haven't found all the asteroids, but if we see one and we know where it's headed, we know. Just because it's a year away doesn't make it any less certain. It's the thing about science. It kind of stays the same regardless of what your opinion is. We know what will happen, not if we open too early, when we open too early, and we are doing it. The scientific community is lockstep in consensus that this is too early. At this point, I don't see any way of changing our dear leader's mind on this because sunlight. We will get a second wave. That wave, and because it's 2 weeks and because people just aren't even bothering to try to understand how this actually works because it's kind of scary and, well, spring break. What's going to happen is a week into it, they're going to claim all the scientists were wrong, everything is safe, and we're doing golden. What they won't realize is the number of infections has gone up dramatically. We just don't know because there are no symptoms to any of these people. But we know because we can add. So 2 weeks into it, we're going to start to see the symptoms. 4 weeks into it, we're going to start to see a pretty serious spike in the wave, and people still aren't going to be interested in going back to social distancing. So even that's not going to be enough evidence to get them to stop. And even if they stop right then and there, there's still a 2 week lag time between when they stop and the numbers start going back down again. So, when it starts to get really bad, they're going to say, why didn't the scientists tell us that this was going to happen? They were wrong again. There is nothing at this point that people who actually know what's going on can possibly do to fix it. A number of states are resisting. Donald Trump has taken to threatening them. And because he said that we can handle this, people haven't been following the social distancing. When the president comes out and says, oh, we've got drugs that I know really good chance are going to work, and people say, oh shit, it's solved, so they don't do it. So I'm actually hesitant to say the one piece of good news in this. We are testing the first human vaccine. I believe it's being tested in the UK. Couple of issues with it, FYI. A vaccine's not a cure. A vaccine keeps you from getting it. If you've already had it, or if you're having it now and in severe distress, this does you zero good. Zero good. There are things that we know that can maybe do that, antibody, other methods, but right now we have no way of fighting it. If you get it, you are on your own. The only support that can be given is to try to keep you alive so your body survives it, so you survive it. We're discovering that it's probably worse than we thought. There's evidence of brain damage and liver damage in people who have had this. Not enough that it can be say conclusively, but it's starting to look like we're going to reach that point. It also appears that we're understanding a little bit more about the younger people who have died from it. This appears to cause in some people clotting. In many cases the clotting is older, but it can happen in younger patients where it appears what is happening is the blood is starting to clot internally without there being a cutter of any kind. One of these clots goes, it either hits your lungs, in which case you get an embolism, if I recall correctly, or your brain, in which case you get an aneurysm, and it either does severe damage and or kills you, stroke, whatever. We're also aware now that it appears that it was here and killing people for at least a little time before we knew it. So we were, once again, as predicted, at least as a possibility, a bit behind on this. So we're trying to catch up. There are some signs then that the mortality rates are higher than we had anticipated because people were dying of, there's been a spike in stroke cases. If I recall, it's actually only about 5%. But 5% over a prolonged period of time is evidence that something significant has changed. 5% in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is nothing. In 3 months across multiple countries that have had COVID-19, that spike, plus a correlation and a discovery that a number of people who have been having that part of that spike, a disproportionate number of them had COVID-19, tells us that there is a very real possibility it's causing that. We do not understand this yet, and we are playing with it because, well, shucks. America is such a great country, and our citizens so strong and resilient and independent that we can't build an economy indoors, and we can't find a way to weather a storm. We have to go out and die in front of the train, or at least sacrifice some people from it, because we're not good enough to outthink it, and we're not strong enough to sit down and shelter in place and fight it. We fought World War II, and we changed our economy for that. But gee, that was back when America was great. Now Trump's president, and we have to make America great again. But given the best opportunity I've seen in a while, the Republican Party is saying, nope, we can't do it. We're not good enough. Glad they love America. Hate to see what they'd be like if they didn't have faith in America, if they were actually part of the Blame America First crowd and had no faith in our citizens. The mayor, I think, of Las Vegas is attempting to reopen all the casinos. Sure, why not? That's worse than the movie theaters, which are opening in states now. Partial releases from the lockdown. Only places where large people are gathering and can infect massive people quickly. Everything else we're going to keep closed. I'll be honest. I did go out today, a little stir crazy. I don't think it's a lockdown. Non-essential businesses are closed in Massachusetts. We're not under lockdown. You can go out. You probably shouldn't. We've gone out less than once a week, but we went out, hopped in the car, drove, decided to go to Wendy's, get a little food, the kids could have some fun, so on and so forth. There were people in there, and it wasn't workers. I don't know if they were ordering food, but it wasn't workers. And Massachusetts were reasonably good on this. Today, Donald Reed Herring of Oklahoma died. I don't think that many people know who he is or would even care. From the vitriol from the right, most people, I think, would probably say, good, I'm glad. And I'm not kidding. That's the kind of vitriol I've been seeing. I'm supposed to be impartial. I'm a little triggered at the moment because this is insane. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Nobody's guessing here. We know what's going to happen. We are repeating a history we have seen and can stop. That is American exceptionalism. Donald Reed Herring died today of coronavirus. He was the brother of Senator Elizabeth Warren. Thank you all for joining us. Apologize for being back into the somewhat more dark mood, but I don't want to go through this again. And my fellow countrymen who detest the ivory tower elites who have this right and have had it right for quite some time, and it's just a fact. It's just, you can study it. You don't want to study it because you don't want to be proven wrong. It's a fact. These people have decided that because there seems to be this false choice between an economy and human lives, they would rather have neither, because if this thing gets out and if we have a second rebounder that's far worse than the first one, if we lose 2 million to 9 million American lives in the period of 2 or 3 months, which by my meager additional skills is a little touch more than losing the 40,000 a year to car accidents that like Dr. Phil was talking about. We lose that many Americans in that period of time. The economy will be booming if you work at a cemetery, if you're an embalmer, if you're an ME. In New York, fuck it, right now in New York, if you've got a legal issue in New York right now and you need a death certificate to prove somebody died so you can get benefits, good luck with that. There are so many death certificates, they are months behind. They can't fill out the death certificates fast enough. Let's reopen. Thank you all for joining us, and my name is Nicholas Triggered $400 Soutter. We will we apologize for not having Stitch or for notifying anyone on that. Mr. Famine was unavailable. We have 2, I think, shows coming up next week. We will have on Dr. Cy Gart also to discuss the conspiracy theories, which we knew were going to come. Everything from 5G causes coronavirus to the government has paid and done this, or it's not even real and it's fake, and all of this is fake news. So we will be discussing that. We are looking into doing a new series with Landon Knoll on sort of American Civics 101. Looking forward to starting that one. I think we have our first show on that also scheduled. We will keep you all apprised, and in the meantime, thank you for joining us.